Okay, guys, and welcome back to Late Night MMA. Let's bring in Kim. How's it going, Kim?
It's going very well, thank you.
So let's just get started here by asking you what led you to become a mixed martial arts referee.
Well, I've always been a fan of martial arts. I started out watching before UFC even was in existence by watching Pancrase, kickboxing, boxing, and Pancrase is basically what I consider the grandfather to the UFC. It's very similar to some of the stylings of the UFC. They just can't hit with an open hand. It's hitting with they can only hit with an open hand, and they wear wrestling shoes and stuff. And Bob Rutan was the king of Pancrase, and Ken Shamrock also did Pancrase. So I watched that, and I was a fan of the sport, and I've watched since UFC 1. And I was an air traffic controller, and I've been studying martial arts myself since 1992. And so when I stopped doing air traffic, I needed something to replace the adrenaline and rules and regulation that I did in air traffic, and it just seemed a natural fit for me. I started out with boxing, and my inspiration for that was Mills Lane. And I got the opportunity to go down to a gym where Ken Shamrock and the Lions Den were working out, and I was doing boxing in one ring and MMA in the other, and never looked back because MMA just felt right, and I stayed with MMA from that point on.
What kind of mixed martial arts did you do?
My first art form was Taekwondo, but when I started watching UFC, it encouraged me to switch and learn more modern art forms. So I did Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, grappling, kickboxing, boxing, a little Krav Maga, some basic judo, and some capoeira even.
Wow, so you've done quite a bit.
Yeah, some more extensive than others. Obviously, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is more extensive than the others because the ground game is so important and very intricate, and the submissions are something you really need to know, I think, to be an effective referee.
One thing about these fights that always kind of confuses me, and I think a lot of fans have confusion, are the glancing blows to the back of the head. Can you just explain to our listeners where exactly the illegal shots to the back of the head is?
Now, that sometimes depends on the state that you're working, because some of the states have different definitions to the back of the head. But what I use for my fighters, because I think it's kind of a lot to put on a fighter for them to remember all these little intricate viewpoints of the back of the head. So what I tell my fighters is try and keep at least two fingers in your hand on the ear at all times in any direction, and they'll keep you clear of the no strike zone. In some states, if anything behind the ears is considered the no strike zone, and in some states you have a safety zone behind the ears to a certain distance beside the ears, and then it comes into where it's like the mohawk rule. You take the tip of the ears in, and then down, and that also includes the neck, and that's the no strike zone. Then you have an inch wide that goes from the tip of the ears. You take it to an inch wide and up to the crown of the head. And that's where the mohawk rule is kind of where you hear that, the mohawk rule. And where that comes into play is when they're throwing elbows and somebody's in the guard. If they tip their head forward in the guard, you need to make sure that if they're on top of you and they tilt their head forward, you don't bring an elbow down and cross that crown of the head, because then that becomes back of the head. And what I usually say is it's always targeted, and that's what a lot of people don't understand is we're looking for targeted blows to the back of the head. So if a fighter turns his head and causes himself to be hit in the back of the head, that is not a foul.
Right,
right. That's his fault. It's his fault. So if he turns his head and he gets hit in the back of the head and then he looks at me and says, "Hey, ref, he just hit me in the back of the head," I'm going to look at him and basically say, "No shit, Sherlock, it's your fault." Right. A lot of times I will say, "Hey, watch the back of the head," and it's not because the other fighter did something wrong, but basically to let him know, okay, that one was on him, but don't go for a second. Don't take a second shot, because it's very tempting. That back of the head is right there. You see it. You want to hit it. But I try to prevent fouls as much as I can. So I'll just issue the warning to try and prevent the foul.
How long before a fight do you usually get the call from the commission that they want you for a specific card?
Well, that depends. Sometimes we get it further out than others. I just got an assignment a few days ago for August 11th in Vegas. But usually, sometimes it's 3 weeks, sometimes it's 4 weeks. It depends on the commission you're working with. And then sometimes I'll have if it's much more time to plan it out. I went to Iraq and did the first show in a war zone for the troops. Of course, that takes a lot of planning, so that one I knew about a year in advance. So, that one was working with a promoter and required a lot of red tape and working with different governmental agencies. So, that one was also required a lot more than a weekend.
Yeah, for sure. So, just taking this August 11th card, for example, you'll fly out to Vegas or head over to Vegas. I'm not sure. Are you located in Vegas?
The UFC's in Vegas, but this is not a UFC event. But I will head down there on the 10th and come back on the 12th. Is standard procedure for any event that I do in Vegas. Is I head out there the day before, because they don't want to fly out the same day, because if there's a problem with the airport or the airline, then they're out one referee. So they really want us there the day before, so there's no issue. We're there, and they don't have to worry about us. So we're there, we're checked in, and it's not an issue. So
I guess my question here is, when they book you for an event, do they tell you which fight you'll be refereeing, or is that like a day before type thing?
No, we don't know what fights we're refereeing until we actually are at the event and they hand out our assignment sheets. And I really like it that way, because a lot of times we are in the same hotel as the fighters in their corners, and so they may run into us and they'll ask us and I won't know, and I'm glad I don't know, because a lot of times I don't know who these corner people are, and they'll ask me, "So are you reffing so-and-so?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." And they say, "Well, if you are, can you do this? Can you?" And I'm like, "Dude, I don't know, and of course I can't." So it's like, it just keeps everybody above board, and there's no improprieties, there's no even chance of impropriety, and that's just the way I like it. The only ones that know ahead of time, and I don't even know ahead of time, but they do assign ahead of time who the main events are, and that's, let go to the press who the main event gets, but I don't pay attention to any of that stuff, so I wouldn't know.
What sort of instructions do you give the fighters backstage in the locker room before the fights?
Well, that's a very lengthy process, because it takes place. It takes the place of a rules meeting when it's an event like that. One of the smaller shows that I do, we have a full-on rules meeting, but I will give them a chance to answer any questions that they may have about rules. I will cover any of the rules that have been muddy, any recent events that have come to play that have left any of the rules to be in doubt or questioned, so I will make sure that I clear them up. And then I go over any of the communication styles that I have, so anything that I say to them, what it means, what they can expect me to say to them, so it's covered, and what I expect from them. So that's pretty much what is covered in one-on-one in the back.
Have you ever had a problem with a fighter not listening to you during a fight?
Only one. Well, it wasn't that he didn't listen to me; he just didn't want to do what I decided to rule on, and that was one instance. And it didn't bother me in the least bit, because he was deciding his own fate. He had had a problem with grabbing shorts and grabbing gloves and grabbing fences, but he grabbed the fence several times, and I had warned him, and I told him, next time you grab the fence, I'm taking a point. Well, then he grabbed the fence, which impeded a takedown, but he ended up being taken down anyway and was on the bottom. And so since he was on the bottom, I pulled him up, took the point, and then decided to return him to the position that he was in before I took the point, put him back on the bottom, and he didn't want to go back down to the ground. And I said, you have a choice. You can go back down to the ground, or you can be disqualified. The choice is yours. And he chose disqualification.
Wow.
So obviously he really didn't want to go to the ground. So, whether you call that not listening, I don't really call it not listening. I really call it he just chose disqualification over going to the ground. But other than that, no.
There's always a lot of controversy when you talk about judging in MMA. What's your opinion on open scoring?
Open scoring. Well, I actually put in my own 2 cents as far as the judging system is concerned, and I actually proposed a new judging system out there, and it was shot down. So I do believe that there can be improvements made, but honestly, the most improvement that can be made in judging is making sure that all the judges that they use are educated and understand the ground game, understand that a fighter that's on the bottom isn't losing a fight necessarily because they're on the bottom. And that's what they really need to understand, is when a fighter is winning and when a fighter is losing. And some of the changes that they've made in the rules, they're trying to clarify that. Honestly, whenever I would judge a fight, I never gave points for defense anyway. And so I think some of the changes they've made are just kind of for the masses. And I don't really see any big changes, honestly, but it's more of a clarification than a change to me.
Do you think instant replay could be a useful tool for the judges or possibly the referees?
Well, referees are allowed to use it in certain states already. It's used in New Jersey. It is used in Nevada. We are allowed to use it in certain indications, whether or not it's going to affect the end result of the fight. And we need to see whether and evaluate whether something was intentional or unintentional, and it's, whether the fight is going to be ended over that or not. We are allowed access to that and to review it before we make that decision. If it's not clear in our mind, we are allowed access to that to use it for instant replay. So we do have access to that in Nevada and New Jersey, and it has been used in New Jersey effectively, and it has been used in Nevada.
What sort of circumstances can it be used under?
Pretty much in Nevada, just like I said, when a fight is, there's been a foul, and a fight is going to be, the fighter cannot continue, so the referee may not have a clear, because things happen very quickly, and they may not have a really clear version of it in their mind, and they would like to review it to see whether or not the foul is intentional or unintentional, because it falls under different guidelines for each of those occasions. So they may want to review it just to make sure that their decision is the correct one. Jersey has a completely different, but New Jersey can use it at their discretion, and they can review whatever they would like to review. And they use it sparingly, because you don't want corners to have the chance to review it, because then there's the possibility of opening it up for abuse and allowing their fighters a chance to rest, just to call for a review of a replay. And that's what they're trying to avoid, is that kind of scenario.
Oh, very interesting. I didn't actually know that. Has it been used very much in the past in the UFC events?
I think it's only been used in New Jersey. I don't know how often New Jersey has used it. You would have to check with Nick Limbo. I know they've used it for sure one time. Any additional times than that, I am not sure on. And I know that Nevada has used it on one occasion where they've allowed the referee access to the footage. But you would have to check with Keith Kaiser as to which event and why, the specifics of it. I don't know which fight it was used for, which event it was used for, because it was not me that used it.
Okay, Kim, final question here. You talked about in the beginning being a fan of Pancrase and then the UFC. Who are some of the guys that you used to like to watch?
Boss Rutan was my favorite Pancrase guy. Of course, he's the king of Pancrase.
Sure.
So, I can talk about him because he's no longer fighting as far as I know. And then someone that I worked with who gave me my start in MMA was Ken Shamrock, and I worked with him with the Lions Den, and he gave me my start in MMA. So as far as the referee is concerned, I was already training in martial arts part of that at different schools here in Reno, where I live. But so he was also in Pancrase as well. So I watched him, and kickboxing. I watched Brennan White. And there were so many great names that also went on to fight in the UFC, where people didn't know that they were Pancrase fighters. So they were known entities to me when they entered the UFC. So, and then Pride. So
Yes. Awesome, Kim. Well, thanks for doing this. Thanks very much for coming on the show, and hopefully we talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you very much.